Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Jeff Fischer.
Jared Brandon.
Christopher James Graham.
And me, Todd Novak. Hi, how are you all doing? So happy to be in front of your ears right now. We are in our little studio here on a super awesome, lovely, sunny Friday afternoon. And we're looking forward to pizza right after this. Not that we're going to try to get this over because we love this more. But apologize for crazy raspy voice right now. My usual velvety tones are a little rough right now. I think I'm still recouping from the show from last week because I pretty much left it. I left it all on the stage, man. Like literally, I was like, I don't know if I can do another song. I just went all out.
That's awesome.
We had a pre-Halloween show, and we wrapped up our set with a cover, Misfits Halloween, and that was awesome. That was rad. He's like, okay, I'm doing a Halloween show. Like, got to do it, right? Especially after the reunion and everything. So, dudes, let's get to it. What's going on in our music worlds? Oh, wait. If you haven't had a chance, go check out our new blog section on the website.
Hey.
theguitarknobs.com.
Knobs.
Typically, when you create blog posts on your website, it's sort of like one of the first things you do. But I wanted to make sure our site was well stocked with our episodes and guest profiles before that. So I'm going to be retroactively going in and sort of doing past posts, blogs, and also current stuff that we're talking about.
A pickup in blog posts. A pickup. You're in frequency.
I'm letting you hang on this
Sorry. Just going to keep digging.
Yeah. So anyways, go check that out. Give them a read. The first one, the one that's up there right now is on about when Jimmy Nielsen from El Rey FX stopped by, and we had a rad time.
Cool dude.
Yeah, and locked up a couple new interviews today. So those will be coming at us in the next couple of weeks. So I'm stoked about that. Anyways, go ahead. Chris, what's up?
Not a whole lot from last week. Still working.
Wrong answer again. Second week in a row.
Sorry.
Ding.
Still working on the new mastering studio and making a lot of plans for that. Sourcing materials for soundproofing and the like. But yeah, that's what's new with me.
Soundproofing materials.
It's actually not soundproofing. It won't be. Most mastering studios aren't really soundproof, but they are acoustically treated. So acoustic treatment products.
Okay.
So
you got the trees that you mentioned.
Yes, we're going to be using tree bark to acoustically treat the studio so that when sound hits it, it explodes in a fiery ball of passion.
How long does tree bark last? Before it's decomposes?
Long enough for me to use it for a long time.
You're going to shellac it?
I might shellac it. We'll see.
Shellac it.
I have to go to a
a
mill and ask for custom scraps.
What about termites?
That's a possibility, but it should be pretty evident just looking at it if there's bugs in it. And
Can't you get it pressure treated so that it doesn't have that?
I think you could, but that would probably also involve arsenic in it, which is what they use in pressure treated. So I wouldn't want to have that exposed. I'm probably just going to go super all natural. I might do a light dusting of nitrocellulose lacquer on the bark, but we'll see.
Rad.
Very interesting.
I'm
I
excited.
can't wait to actually see it.
It's going to sound real good.
Beautiful.
What kind of tree is it going to come
I'm
from?
hoping ash, but I'm not sure. It depends on what's available because ash has a crazy deep,
Right.
especially mature ash, has crazy deep bark grooves. So if sound hits it, it will die.
I like a deep crack in the ash. Hey.
Man, whoa! I salute you. That was a
Where's
great
the
one.
pen? I'm going to start marking off Jared here.
Oh man,
What the hell?
That was really good.
Okay,
Timber.
You lose a piece of pepperoni every time that happens. Check.
You don't like that?
The puns? I love puns so much.
No, not the puns. I'm not even going to do it. I'm not even going to do it. Okay. All right. And those pepperonis will land on my plate. That's the penalty.
That's the only one you're getting.
What do you got going on?
Okay, kind of a continuation from last week. So I had this crazy bird's eye neck, and a friend of mine down the road, Chris OD, he does guitars, and he refinished this maple neck, and it's looking really good. And he put a 50s decal on it. So I ordered this body off of Flea Bay, and it's actually a Mexican-made, an MIM or Mexican-made body.
Made in Mexico.
That's right. And I got to tell you, everything I've ever had, I haven't had that much Mexican-made stuff, but everything I've had, I've always liked. I've never disliked it. In fact...
Te gusta?
Right. Anyway, yeah, this body's pretty cool. Somebody had taken the original finish off this body and resprayed it in nitro lacquer. I don't know, the old paint. It's like a seafoam green, blue type of weird color. So
Was that an original paint job or?
No, it was refinned and thin lacquer.
Okay.
So like the old 50s style.
So is it a little beat up or?
Yeah, it's beat up, but
That's cool.
yeah. I mean, I don't mind. I don't really care what they look like as much as I care about how it feels and plays. So, and I got it for less
That
than a
used to
couple
be the
hundred.
adage for getting a wife too.
160, 170, I think I paid.
There's an old song called "If You Want to Be Happy for the Rest of Your Wife, better make an ugly woman your wife."
That's a good song. That's really funny.
So I got the body today, and I gave it to my buddy that's got the neck, and I just got to get a tremolo for it and a bridge and
All the parts.
Put a nut, and yeah, I think I have plenty of parts at home, but
Are you gonna do anything special? Like, are you just making it like just straight up like
just
factory
50s,
style?
man, just factory 50s. Just to, I don't know. I don't think I have a guitar that's just plain factory 50s. I'd like to just keep it as a demo guitar for 50s style pickups.
That's cool. Perfect. Keep
There
it.
you go.
Keep it true.
Yeah.
Well, we got that show coming up. I'm sure we'll be able to find a bunch of good old parts there. Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, good.
Anyways, awesome. Jefe,
Yes, sir.
what you got?
So, in preparation for today, I was playing around with compression. Digitally. Done.
That's it.
That's done.
Cool.
Do we want to talk about anything or not yet?
No, I was just kind of checking.
Okay. Checking.
Yeah.
So just to explain that probably a little bit more is, of course, I'm all like amp sim nonsense. So
We've got a good spread of things
What
as
does
far
that
as
mean?
like disciplines and stuff. You're really into the amp sim and not being on stage and not playing with actual like live equipment as much. Not that you don't like that. It's just that's not.
don't do it,
you-
as
it's
much.
not, it's hard to.
Sit in my basement by myself a lot.
Yeah.
As you know, Jared, you agree?
Oh yeah. If you make a mistake, nobody knows.
Thank you, Auntie Jared. Is there any more hot dish? Yeah, that is true. If you make a mistake, nobody knows, and that's the rush and the murder of doing it live. I have yet to have a perfect show, and
Is there such a thing?
I mean, there's got to be, right?
I don't know. Maybe.
Let
I've
me ask
had
you
pretty
something
damn
here.
close to a perfect
You'd
show.
be
before.
happy with it.
There's little mistakes, right, that people in the crowd probably will never notice.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's just blatant, terrible, like if you're playing intro to Sweet Child and you flubble that up, everybody will know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got to start over. It's like, let's try that again.
It's got to be perfect.
That I've seen that actually. That happened at my very, very first show. The very first show I ever did live. I think I might have actually mentioned this before, but I started playing. You know, I had all my friends out in the crowd and everything, and it was being videotaped, and the whole 9 yards. I was set. That was my moment. And about the fourth song in was my favorite song. I loved playing the song. It was a really good one. And I started playing a song. It just wasn't one that we had.
It's my favorite random song I've never heard.
And I stopped and my brain was like, "What are you doing?" And my hand's like, "What do you mean?" And my brain's like, "Oh no." And I look over.
I've done that.
Just to check. And wait, am I crazy? Something's wrong. Something's wrong. And I look over and our singer is standing up and he's like primed and ready on the mic. He's leaning forward and he kind of does a slow turn to look at me like, "What are you doing?" And then I kind of crane my head a little further, and our drummer, who's this big giant 300-pound beast, he's got his elbow up on his snare, holding his stick, looking at me all belligerently, like, "You idiot! What are you doing?" And then I turned to the crowd and I just stopped and I said, "Just kidding." And my friend Steve, all the way in the back of this it's a packed house, he goes, "So we're gonna miss."
Oh man!
And I got it on tape. It was brutal.
I had a similar experience one time. I was playing at a wedding, and I missed my cue to begin playing the song "Beautiful Day" by myself.
At a wedding.
And by miss my cue, I mean I was like 5 minutes early, and I didn't know about it. And
So
finally,
you're playing with a track?
No, it was like an acoustic version with like delay on it, pretty heavily affected. And I got into it and kind of glanced over. I was like a minute in, and the whole wedding party was just staring at me. And the minister sort of leaned forward in the mic and said, "Sorry, Chris, we're not quite ready for you yet."
Oh, the call! You got a call out.
But it was
Man,
beautiful.
by a
I can't
priest.
wait to hear it
was,
again.
It was
Yeah.
awkward, and I was really mature, so I leaned forward and said, "That's when they told me to go." And that was super awkward.
That's ugly.
Yeah,
But it's
19-year-old
not my
Chris Graham.
fault.
My
It's
worst.
their fault.
Somebody else did it.
My worst train wreck was a violin solo. I play the violin.
With your
But
guitar?
it was no.
That would be rad.
My mommy was accompanying me. The song. I forgot the song. But I started playing it, and I just started squeaking, and I was at
Fire the
church. I was in
Bumblebee?
front of like 500, 600 people. And I'm a young teenager, maybe 10 or whatever.
That's Fleur de
12,
Lis, right?
13. Yeah, that's what it is. Yep.
All right. I knew it was something.
Violin,
You win.
man.
You
That
win.
is the most unforgiving instrument. And I'm just,
yeah.
I was devastated. And my mom just did the dun 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 ding. I
So
looked
she
at
bailed
her,
you out of it?
And she said, "Let's start over. You can do it." You know?
Yeah.
And I got through it. I did it perfect after that.
Yeah.
So it was crazy.
You know, it's funny. The
Devastating.
crowds are usually pretty forgiving. You know, at this last show we did, we had the band that was opening for us. They had our new drummers. I think it was like his second gig. Actually, it might have even been his first gig. His first or second gig. I'm not really sure. But they started trying to play a song, and they tried like 3 times, and and they restarted 3 times. And then they got it. They clicked it. But you know, I think a lot of times people who are at shows are also musicians. So you know, there's the bass player. He you could tell like he just kind of had I don't want to say bad form. That's not the right word, but maybe he adapted a not advantageous way of playing that he just stuck with, but that wasn't going to be able to maintain over a long time. So I mean, he's his whole arm was pushing the pick.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it was just like, you're like, oh, come on, buddy, get through it. You know, so, you know, we're rooting for him. You're just sending good vibes, but you also are like, oh, ouch. That kind of hurts.
He was having some treble.
Oh, man. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Whoa.
That's 2 pepperonis.
That wasn't the normal one.
That's a new one.
Whoa.
That's a different one. All right. So, for me, I was super happy because I'm building a new pedal, and I had a pain in the butt trying to get. I was trying to get two different kinds of dual gang pots, which is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, because there were very specific features on those pots, and something just freaked me out, because like I just saw the screens shut down right now, and I was like, oh no. No, they were just kind of going to sleep because they were bored of my story, apparently, the screens were. So anyways, those came in yesterday, and I posted a nice little thing on Instagram, and I'm super excited to get started on those. And I bought more than I need, because if this works well, I might build a couple of them. So we're gonna do one of them as a giveaway for sure. So we'll be giving that away to the guitar pedal, the guitar knobs, Pedal Fiend Association, which there is none, but all the listeners out there, pretty much anybody worldwide that we can actually ship the pedal to, which I don't know. I've
Ohio.
never shipped, within the country. But if we can ship it worldwide, we will certainly try. I don't know what the limitations on. I know there's like, lead problems and stuff like that other pedal shippers encounter. I don't make them professionally, so I don't know what to expect. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Indeed.
We are also going to have another awesome giveaway sponsored by Brandon Wound Pickups. We're going to give away a set of why don't you tell them what they're going to win, Johnny?
To be honest, I don't remember.
Telecaster pickups.
Telecaster pickups. Oh, yeah. You'll win some really nice Telecaster pickups.
I just could have said that. What else is it about?
Not in that
Do you remember
voice.
that? I think you call them they were the vintage wound.
Yeah. Okay, now I know. I'm sorry. Yeah, they're wound with some really old wire. The wire is like 25, 30 years old, but it's still really good wire.
What's the purpose of doing that?
I don't know. It just, people get excited about it.
Because
it's older wire.
Because it's vintage spec.
Wire has...
I'm trying to make it clear that you just go like, well, I just had some old wire lying around.
Yeah.
No, actually I have a lot of this wire. There was
Which you got specifically because you need to wind.
Right. Well, what I do
specs.
is sometimes I'll look around for some new old stock wire just to have in my arsenal, because there's a lot of guys that believe wire was manufactured maybe better or a different way, and
Different enamel
and
or something.
it may cause a anomaly if it's just different, wound, hand wound, or whatever. It's all
Different mixes
mojo
in
and
the alloys
folklore
and
or
stuff.
whatever. And yeah, I mean, I really like having that stuff, and it's handy to have the stuff around, especially for rewinds. If somebody has a pickup from a certain era, and I have wire from the same era, they're going to be super happy. Because then they'll feel, oh well,
I get
it's a better match.
The original thing. I'm not getting
Yeah.
a new pickup that's meant to feel old. It's like legit. All the parts are old. That's cool.
And-
so that's what they'll be winning.
Yes, they will.
I love
It's
that.
Really nice pickups.
That's a awesome setup, and they look great too. I mean, Telecaster pickups are Telecaster pickups, but these look pretty sweet.
And they're going to sound really good too.
Yeah, I believe it. So that's all the new stuff this week. I will say, at the show that we did, I just want to throw this out there for anybody that has encountered this. So I kind of went. I didn't want to put tape. Okay, so I had a pick holder on my mic stand, the kind that you put the picks in, the little rubber thingamabobber. And I left it at one of the last shows I did. So
that happens so much.
Doggone it.
Just
Right. And then I was like, okay, I'll just put tape on the mic stand. I'm like, no, because I got to grab the mic stand too a little bit. So I totally did old school, like Van Halen style, just rolled up a piece of duct tape and stuck it to the butt end of my body, my guitar body.
there it is.
Yeah. And just stuck a couple picks on there. It was great. It worked out. Duct tape. Who knew?
There you go.
So I might just go that route again from now on. I got plenty of duct tape. So anyways, so that's that. Okay, listen, this episode, which you are listening to, which says something along the lines of, as yet untitled, working title, compression pedals. What's up with those? Or something to the like. And it's not just compression pedals, but there is a huge... I think a huge...
Ginormous.
What?
Yeah, ginormous.
Ginormous. A huge, ginormous void of understanding, or at least confusion as to what compression actually does. Mm-hmm. And especially because when you're talking about compression in a mix versus compression on a pedal board, or compression on both of those working together, that's when it starts to get really, really, really tricky. Starting with like the fundamentals of what compression does is already misleading. They just named it wrong. I feel like it's named wrong.
What should it be called?
Based on what we're going to learn, because Chris is going to kind of lead our discussion in compression today, and he as somebody who is a professional masterer, audio masterer, he's got to use a lot of different forms of compression. Mm-hmm. As guitar players, we use compression in slightly different ways, but often to achieve probably the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's just a bit of a crazy thing, and I will throw this out there. That pedal show on YouTube has done, I think, up to date 2 shows on compression. They do one called Compression 101, which is the second show. The first one, they were just talking about where to put it in a pedal chain. And I mean, if you guys haven't watched that channel, it's fantastic. Those 2 guys are outstanding. I love watching their show. I always learn so much. And they helped me to understand a lot of that, but I think there's a lot more to talk about too. So anyways, with that, I'm going to hand over to Chris, and then we're going to pepper him with questions.
Gotcha.
After.
Yeah, the more I think back and forth we have, I think the better for this conversation, because we're at a little bit of a disadvantage. Like you said, Todd, compression is difficult to understand, and I've been thinking about how to explain this, and I think I'm going to sing a little bit. So brace yourselves for that, just to demonstrate.
All right.
In the future. So I'm nervous about that. But so let me start by saying, what I do as a mastering engineer, just a little explanation there. So I compress for a living, and making things sound good while you compress them is always give or take, and you have to set the compressor just right to have it sweeten the source material rather than just destroy it and make it sound terrible. So it's like any other tool. A hammer, if you use it correctly, is very precise. If you use it wrong, it breaks everything. So
good analogy.
Indeed. So when you're playing guitar, I think we need to talk about what good guitar playing is to start with. And in my opinion...
Okay, wait. So when you're saying good guitar playing, you're saying good guitar playing not from
an
a
artist.
Subjective...
Yeah, from you listen to someone play and you're like, oh my God, they're amazing. What 3 ingredients do they possess?
Okay.
And I would say those 3 ingredients are they're playing the right notes at the right time, at the right volume. And those are the 3 things that if you are missing any one of those things, you are not playing the guitar well. And what makes compression such an interesting conversation is that there's nothing you can do. There's no device you can use to help you play the right notes. And there's no device you can use within reason to play at the right time. But a compressor can help you play at the right volume in some instances if used correctly. So a compressor is really, it's a type of robot. It's a type of matron, I guess we'll say. That
An automatron?
An automatron. That's probably the wrong word.
What's
I don't
an
know.
auto?
I'm trying to
Sounds cool.
sound fancy. But so when you're playing most styles of music, especially with rhythm, there's this desire I want to play the same volume for this song or this section of the song. And a compressor can be very helpful because it can help control your volume on a micro level. It's as if there's a robot sitting there on a volume pedal listening to you playing. Two robots sitting there on a volume pedal, and they are turning you up and down extremely quickly in order to make sure that you are playing at a more consistent volume level. And then you can communicate to these robots through the knobs and the pedal and tell them, speed up, slow down, turn me up more, or turn me down more. And yeah.
So at the core, most basic level,
It's a robot.
it is a robot with two foot pedals. We're going to complicate the hell out of this super easy idea that it's managing your lows, so turning up your lows.
Let me dive into that. It's actually one pedal,
Okay.
but if used properly, it sounds so. You don't have a robot that's turning you up, and then a separate one that's turning you down. You only have one that's turning you down. But if let's circle back to that. Let's put a pin in that.
Okay.
That's going to make a lot more sense in about 2 minutes.
Okay.
So the way a compressor works, and this is the part of the show where I get to sing for you guys, so bear with me. I'll try to not make this lame. But a compressor, it functions based on something called a threshold. And a threshold is this sort of invisible line, and once you get louder than this invisible line, then the compressor starts to do stuff. If you are below this invisible line, the compressor does nothing. So it's possible, if you have a compressor pedal and you're using it on your guitar rig, that you might have thought to yourself, it's not doing anything. And that's, if it's not set up properly, then yes, it's not supposed to do anything until stuff gets to a certain volume level. So if I were to, I'm going to sing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if that went something like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm getting louder as I count higher, that's without compression. If I turn the threshold, say the threshold's at 6. If I turn the threshold down so it was below the 4, then it might sound something more like this, depending on how this pedal was set up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now the 4 and the 5 are much more similar in volume. And this is really useful for whether you're playing rhythm or whether you're playing a lead, because it makes everything fat and everything thick. And if you turn it all the way down, to say right after the 1, then suddenly it sounds more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everything is basically the same volume. All things being equal and me being a better singer, it would be more effective. But so now if you increase, what I did there was I compressed after the 1, the 2, 3, and then 4, and the 5, but I also added gain after that so that the 1 was now as loud as the 5. So I turned everything up and then compressed above the 1, and that made the 1 the same volume as the 5, but then it turned down the 2, turned down the 3 a lot, turned down the 4 a whole lot, turned down the 5 a ton, which made everything about the same volume. Mm-hmm. So the big variable, and you don't really have to worry about this with an electric guitar pedal, the most popular compressor pedal, without a doubt, is probably the MXR Dynacomp. It's kind of the classic, and there's a lot of variations on that. Many, many, many compressor pedals are basically clones of that, and slight mods, and there's others out there as well. But for that pedal, it's basically one knob. And as you turn it up, you get gain and compression. So that gain makes it so that the quieter notes are louder, and that compression makes it so that the louder notes are quieter.
Right.
So,
well, that's what I was talking about with the
exactly. But I think one of the biggest confusions that comes in is that people think, well, compression makes my quieter notes sound louder. That's not actually true. Compression only makes your louder notes sound quieter, but because you're using gain in conjunction with compression,
it's bringing everything up.
Bringing everything up.
Ah.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
I'm gonna interrupt.
Yes, please.
I have a noise gate at home. I think it's a Rocktron. Nothing fancy. That blue Rocktron. And it's a noise gate. And I asked my buddy, I said, hey, what do I do so I don't get squealing and all that kind of crap when I play live? Oh, you got to get a Rocktron. And it's basically one knob.
It's the opposite of a compressor in many ways. So the threshold, instead of moving from the ceiling down, moves from the floor up. And it functions in much the same way, in that once the signal drops below the threshold, then it begins to turn down.
The higher I turn it up, the more unnatural sound I'm getting, and I don't like it.
Well, and the reason for that is that you want that threshold to sit below where you play. So it's right above the noise floor. Okay. As you turn that up, if that noise gate, that threshold, and this is the important concept here, gets to the point where it's above your quietest notes, it'll start messing with your quieter notes, and it'll leave your louder notes alone. So the noise gate's a perfect thing to bring into this conversation because it's threshold based. In the same way that the compressor is. A compressor makes something quieter once it's above the threshold. A noise gate makes something quieter once it's below the threshold.
So a 1-2 punch on a telly would be typically tellies have more inherent noise anyways. So you're using a noise gate
you could take
or a
out the
noise
hum
suppressor
when you're not playing.
Right. Could kill that sort of white noise that's coming through. Right.
Yeah.
And then your compressor is going to take the way that you attack the guitar and equalize that all out to a degree.
So if you were going to play the Star Spangled Banner on the guitar and you went do 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 do, and you get that last note crazy
Beautiful.
loud,
Right.
so ugly, the compressor will keep that note from being
Crazy pants.
ungainly.
So do you think people, when they are buying a compressor, they're thinking, oh, I want all my sound to be the same across the board? Or are they thinking,
Well,
I want sustain?
There's two reasons to use compression on an electric guitar. And I think that's primarily the conversation we're having here.
Let's do it.
One is to tighten the sound of the guitar, and you get a much more consistent volume, but you also get a fatness from this. The other thing, and this is related to our noise conversation as well too, is as you compress more, you're going to get more gain. That's just the way the Dynacomp works, and almost every other compressor pedal out there. As you turn up the gain and compress your louder notes, your noise floor will get louder. And as a result of that, that also can create sustain. So if it's essentially feedback. So if you've got your amp up super loud and you put your electric guitar right in front of it, it's going to feedback like crazy. Mm-hmm. As you walk away and you turn up the compressor pedal, that's essentially making your guitar way louder, so it feeds back a lot more, and you can get that infinite sustain, sort of Steve Vai thing.
So if you are playing at a lower volume and want more pseudo amp dynamic, right, to where it's going to make it sound like the amp's being pushed.
Well, and here's that's a great road for us to go down. What makes compressors really great, if you're using natural amp distortion and you're trying to push the breakup, is that distortion is also threshold based.
Yes, because
there's a certain point where if you put too many volts into the system, it starts to fall apart. And instead of a nice, beautiful sound wave, it chops the top of it off.
Right.
It basically makes plateaus on the sound wave.
Is that because like if you're playing slower or softer, you've got there's time for the speaker essentially to move. If you're turning it way up and it's just all like
Yeah,
right?
nothing but
Then
plateaus.
Right. So it has less dynamic range,
Yes.
dynamic movement range.
Dynamic being the difference between loud notes and quiet notes.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of all fluttering out there on the edge and not as big of movement, giving you that sound dynamic, right? And a compression pedal, if you're playing at a lower volume but want that sort of push, you can do that with a pedal.
Yes, and
Is that correct?
And you can. Let me explain that. So distortion. If any of you guys have ever used a really nice tube amp, and you
tell me about that.
Indeed.
I love it.
If you plug a guitar into it, a really, really, really great tube amp, you can play it lightly and it'll be clean, and then you bite into it a little bit with the pick, and suddenly full-on distortion. That's happening because you're crossing the threshold where you run out of headroom in the amp, and it begins to distort. Now, a compressor can be really interesting before an amp like that because it can help you control that dynamic before where you start to distort. So, and we're kind of getting more esoteric here, but it can be really useful when you're playing rhythm to if you're thinking, boy, sometimes I'm getting excited in a show, I'm just playing the guitar a little too aggressively, and the amp starts to fall apart a little bit, starts to fart, and so the compressor can be nice because you can say, hey, compressor, here's the threshold I want. I really don't want to play a whole lot louder than this point. And you can keep yourself pinned up against that point where you're almost breaking up on an amp, that real nice sweet spot where it's not full-on distortion, but there's elements of clean tone and elements of breakup when you play. So a compressor, that's hard to do, especially with a not as nice amp. If you're working with like an Epiphone, one of those cheaper Epiphone tube amps, they're a little harder to stay in that sweet spot than say like a really nice Marshall or a really nice vintage Fender or one of those handmade amps.
And that's based on basically the volume that the amp can push.
Yeah.
And before it starts clipping, like a low wattage amp versus a high wattage amp, right?
And there's a degree of how wide, shall we say, is the threshold of breakup.
Right.
So on some amps, it's like
instantaneous,
full-on, ridiculous, unusable distortion. And I used to have a small little 5-watt Epiphone combo that was like that, where you would try to get right in that spot, and then you dig a little bit, and the speaker was just, like it didn't sound cool.
Yeah.
That stinks.
Yeah.
But speaker selection, I mean, we're starting to go down a rabbit hole with this, but speaker selection, which I just spent a whole lot of time learning about, can really play into that even if you have an awesome amp.
Yeah.
So loads and loads of variables. But you started to go down something I want to press on. One of the questions that I had was, what types of music or sound benefits do you get from most compressors?
Well, and here's the thing. If you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, compression, let me ruin your life here. You've probably never heard music that didn't have a compressor on it before in your life. If you have it, it wasn't on the radio or TV or in a movie. Compression is easily one of the most widely used audio tools, period. So it's sort of like trying to build a house without a hammer. If you're trying to not use compression, and on at least on occasion.
From a recording or production standpoint.
From a recording or production standpoint,
Right.
or I'm a total nerd, so take this with a grain of salt, or even from a guitar standpoint. There's going to be a song in your set
Right.
that's going to require compression to sound right.
Let me ask you something right off my little pea brain here. When did they start using live compression in the
Oh,
music
good
industry?
question.
I wanna say that
Oh,
was-
you know what? You get one of your pepperonis back.
There we go. Yes.
That was a good
That's
question.
what I want to know. What,
Well, I'm not as much of a historian on this stuff, but I would say early 70s. But compression's been around since the 30s or 40s. It's a pretty old technology.
Whoa.
So, but again, when we think, oh my gosh, I love that tube amp, it just punches. You know, like if you're looking at a blues breaker or a twin reverb or a plexi or what have you. What you like about it is the way it compresses. It's a good tube amp naturally compresses in a much more pleasing, punchy way than, say, like a crate solid state amp from 1994 or something like that.
Right.
And and one of the things there too is on a really great boutique or vintage tube amp. It probably has a tube rectifier. So the power supply of it is also vacuum tube. And as you begin to distort with it starts to sag and it starts to run out of juice. That also is compression. So when you listen to a really great amp, not only does it break up nice as a result of the way tubes compress when they distort, but also as a result of the power supply. So
I think so. You brought up a point that I think this is where some of the myth stuff comes in. This is like, I play mostly rhythm, so I'm like, you know what? I'm playing pretty consistently. I dig in, occasionally and stuff, but I've always felt like compressors are used for guys who are doing lead.
Well, yeah. By and large, you're absolutely right. Playing lead is a lot harder to play the right volume of note at the right time, especially on some of the more, like a Strat, in my opinion, is way harder to be precise volume-wise than I would say a Les Paul or something like that. And some people might disagree. That's just me as a guitar player. But it can get unruly really fast on a brighter guitar.
Yeah, isn't a humbucker pickup kind of a compressor in itself? Because of the way it's...
That's a little beyond my expertise, but...
We only had a pickup guy here.
Oh, yeah.
Understood
I mean,
compression.
because
It's possible.
not only that, but I actually listened to that compression video.
Oh, yeah?
That you had...
It was great. It's really interesting.
And I remember that in there. I'm like, a humbucker is coming? Well, I could see that because it's... I don't know. Maybe I can't. I got to look into that. Well, I'm serious, man. That's why I asked you. Like this, there's a good deal. I don't know.
Maybe I can.
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know
question.
everything there is to know about pickups. I never claimed to, but
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting.
So
It feels more compressed to me.
Oh, yeah.
Like it feels a lot easier to control a humbucker.
I think that control piece is the part that I was going to touch on, which is when using a compressor, there's a belief that it does make the guitar easier to play.
Yes.
So
Yes, it does. If
is
it's-
that because all your notes are the same volume, so you can, fly through scalular things a lot
Make
quicker?
it like a little more forgiving is what
Yeah,
you're
it's
saying.
more forgiving. And when I say
But what makes it more forgiving? Is it that everything is at the
I
same
think
volume?
so. Yeah, I think it's you need to play the right note at the right time at the right volume, and if that's a lot of multitasking for us guitar players, and it's virtually every instrument. But a compressor is this amazing, unique effect in that it is a robot that can augment your own intelligence and gifting and talent to help you with that third component. That are you playing at the right volume? So it's tricky because you have to give this robot the right parameters with which to make those decisions. But it does, in the strictest sense of the word, it is a robot because it does make decisions within the parameters that you give it. And that's what a robot does. So,
Okay, another question.
yeah.
All right. So let's say you have you're playing almost at like a I have in one of my sets that I do for one of the bands. I'm playing. It's acoustic-ish sounding, at times, and in order to
Every rose has its thorn.
yeah,
Oh, that's my favorite.
but thanks for that. No, but I don't want to sacrifice a lower, like if I need to kind of quiet it down a little bit or something, if I'm doing that, I don't want to sacrifice that low
Your
stuff.
ability to be dynamic.
Right. But I also don't, when you're playing that like cleaner strumming, stuff, it's Johnny Cash type stuff. It's like, I also don't want to hit crazy stuff and make people go like, that sucks. So I actually got the compressor that's sitting on the table just for that, and then realized, man, I really don't know how to use this damn thing.
Well, we're looking at basically an MXR Dynacomp clone, and this type of pedal would mostly be used with lead stuff, but a little bit of it, just a subtle amount of it.
I just had it just on a touch.
Well, and what I would recommend for people that are experimenting with compressors is you have to know how to hear compression when it happens to be able to use it properly. So you have to develop your ear like you would with anything else. So what I recommend is to get a guitar out and just start going chunk, 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 and slowly turn up the compressor until you start to hear. And if you've got a looper pedal, loop up a chunk, 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 put the compressor pedal after that, and slowly begin to turn it up.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Until you start to hear.
That's a fantastic idea. All right,
I
do
see
that.
what it's doing.
Tell us that one more time.
Yeah, so I would get a looper pedal if you've got a looper pedal.
Well, it's easier to remember things.
Get it so it's doing. Even if you could do it with just chunk, 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 on a guitar, or you'd be like.
Gilligan's Island.
Or there's a really bad impersonation of a Jimi Hendrix thing that I got wrong. Anyways, yeah. But so you get a lead part or rhythm part, get that going.
Whenever you're mostly playing
on the loop, and then after the loop, plug that into a compressor pedal, turn it all the way to the left, which is going to be off, and then begin to slowly turn it up and listen for how it changes the tone.
Okay.
And what you have to develop is so that you can hear that's compressed or it's not compressed.
Yeah.
And or that's compressed too much or that's compressed too little. But it really takes a lot of experimentation. And you honestly could know nothing about compression, the thresholds and the ratios and all that stuff. If you sit down with a loop and you experiment, I'm going to slowly turn each of the knobs in this compressor and see if I like it. Just like any other effect.
Yeah.
You got to sit there and goof around with it and say, do I like this or do I not like this? It's just difficult to do it while you're playing guitar.
It is very difficult to do that while you're playing guitar. While we are talking about the different components, let's actually walk through. So you also have a Wampler.
Yes. My favorite compressor pedal is the Wampler Ego compressor. It is awesome.
Okay.
So
let's walk through each of the knobs on that.
Yeah. So if you guys, if you're driving or whatever,
imagine if you will,
a beautiful blue sparkle pedal that's got 5 knobs on it and 1 switch. Really, really nice one. And basically, there's the sustain knob on the far bottom left, which is essentially the same knob that you see on the MXR Dynacomp. It's the comp knob. And as you turn that up, it lowers the threshold at which it's going to compress, but it also adds gain at the same time. In a studio compressor, very few compressors do that at the same time. Usually you have to add gain separately from adjusting the threshold. So, and there's definitely exceptions to that. 1176s and whatnot, don't. Mm-hmm. Anyway, sorry, I digress. So, a lot of times on some compressor pedals, you'll have an additional gain. That's a volume knob that's on the far left.
Would that also be level in some cases?
Yes, level or gain.
Level, gain, or
trim
volume.
Or whatever. And so you've got that going on. Most compressor pedals will have some sort of tone knob as well, which is exactly what it sounds like.
Tone knob or EQ or something.
Yeah, or EQ. As you compress, a lot of times you're going to warm up the signal. It's going to take out the brightness and make it chunkier. So some people like the ability to, on the compressor pedal, be able to brighten it up a little bit. And it's definitely very useful. One of the things that's unique on the Ego compressor is it has an attack knob. Now, the attack knob is very fascinating, and what it does is it slows down how fast the compressor grabs something and turns it down. So, I get to sing again. If I were going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it get louder and louder and louder as I turn the compressor down, let's say below the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That 4 and that 5 are now the same volume as about the 3. If I slow the attack down, it might sound something more like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it begins to slow down how fast it grabs that note. And that can be very useful, especially in a rhythm scenario, because you might want more chunk. When
Like Ringo's drums.
Bingo. More chunk or more punch. Or you might want a really plucky lead sound,
Right.
where you hear that pick really loud and then it begins to grab the note after that.
So that's a very interesting use for that.
Yes, you can
I like that.
definitely, and this is what we're talking about, is the use of compression to change the envelope of a note. So let me demonstrate what I mean by envelope. An envelope, this is no envelope. Ba, that's just a single note that goes like this. If I were to decay at the end of the note, that would go ba. I'm changing the envelope, basically the volume of a single note. The attack is super useful for changing the very beginning of that note. So I could go ba,
Right.
or I could go ba. But all these different, for any of you guys that have messed around with synths before, it's a very synthy concept.
So having like a rack mount, and you want to do like a reverse guitar. Do you ever see the reverse effect on a guitar? So basically they're using compression to make that effect.
Not usually, no. They're usually using delay.
Wrong. You just lost a pepperoni for that one.
But it's similar. It's similar. That's,
Oh, it's your fault.
I got to get extra pepperoni.
You were right in that you were the reverse effect switches the direction of the envelope. When you make the note backwards, the envelope is now backwards. So instead of dang, it's
They're using that technology, right?
Yeah, you're messing with envelopes.
So I'm in the realm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Half
So
pepperoni.
this attack knob, and most studio compressors also have a release knob. Occasionally, if you're dealing with something crazy like the Keeley compressor or some other fancy doodad, guitar pedals, I think the Keeley has a release knob on it. I might be wrong about that, but anyways, both the attack and the release mess
Got
with
attack and clipping. I know that.
Gotcha. There's some the super duper fancy huge one, I'm sure, has a release button.
They got one that's like $300 for like.
Yeah, and if you're seeing,
But the standard 4 knob is sustained level attack and clipping.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but some of the fancier ones, if you were looking at a computer here, some of them have lights on them, like a volume meter.
Yeah.
And I think this is worth bringing up. If you are using a compressor in a studio scenario, or you're using a compressor that has those light knobs on it, most people won't, from guitar pedal standpoint, those knobs indicate how much or those lights indicate how much the compressor is turning down the signal.
I see.
So bottom line, nugget of truth here, if you're using a compressor in GarageBand or Logic or Pro Tools or whatever and you're goofing around, just don't do more than between 3 and 5 dB of gain reduction, and it'll probably sound decent. Even if your attack is wrong and your release is wrong and your ratio, I'll talk about ratio here in just a second. So long as you're not doing too many dB is the measurement of volume. So long as you're only seeing like -2 or -3 or -4 or -5, you're going to be okay. If you're looking at a compressor that's showing you -24, that's going to sound bad.
Yeah.
Almost all the time.
All right. And let's see. Ratio.
Ratio, yeah. So ratio you usually don't need to worry about with guitar pedals. If you've got a Dynacomp at home that you bought and are thinking, boy, maybe I should examine this a little bit more, because Chris said all music ever has been compressed. And that's, definitely in the past 30 years, you probably have never heard anything that was released to any public acclaim that wasn't compressed in some way, with the exception maybe of some classical music. So ratio, and it's going to get technical. You don't need to understand this to use compression, begin to use compression effectively. Ratio is once you hit the threshold, how much do you want stuff to turn down? So what I've been demonstrating is essentially an infinity ratio. It's essentially limiting. So when I'm singing and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm basically demonstrating limiting. The 4 and the 5 are the same volume as the 3. Ratio, as you turn it down, say 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, is for every 1. So 3 to 1 is for every 3 dB that we go up above the threshold, only turn it up 1 decibel.
I see.
If it's 8 to 1, for every 8 decibels that we go up, only go up 1 decibel.
That's good stuff. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's complicated.
So that's kind of built into most guitar pedals, right? Some of it can.
Some
of these other knobs.
The ratio is preset on most guitar pedals.
But when you're talking like a studio level compressor, you get more refinement because you get more access to the robot.
Yes. So, and no matter what you're doing, you should be looking at the gain reduction meter, those little red lights, or that needle that jumps backwards compared to normal needles. And basically what you're looking for is to make sure it's not jumping back too far, that you're not seeing a ton of gain reduction. And if you are seeing a ton of gain reduction, you can do several things to compress less. One, and the most simple way, is to turn the threshold up to make it so that louder notes aren't going to hit that threshold. The other thing you can do is you can turn your ratio down so that... whoa,
geez.
That was a guitar pedal.
I threw the guitar pedal across the room.
Hey, Todd, you might... in post, you might want to use a compressor.
Oh, I was just going to say that.
For that. So it's not too loud for our listeners.
Whoops.
So, but as you turn that ratio down, the compressor is going to be more gentle. Now, let me talk about one more thing with compression that's super cool. And as a mastering engineer, I'm just obsessed with this. When I'm talking to people about how to mix their music better, it's as a mastering engineer, it's a thing I do a lot. Somebody will send me a project and I'll call them back and say, hey, I love the songs. Here's maybe some mix changes I might recommend. One of the things I bring up that's little known about compression is something called parallel compression. And essentially all that means is you take the signal you want to compress, you split it in half, you compress half the signal, and you don't compress the other half of the signal, and then you combine them back together. This is
sort of like a 2-amp thing.
Yes, sort of like a 2-amp thing.
Or 2 different speakers in one cabinet, Jeff.
Not even similar.
There you go.
But not even close.
But anyways, when you do that, compression becomes a lot more forgiving. And you can do some things that you couldn't get away with when you are blending the two signals together. The Wampler Ego compressor has a blend knob on it that does just that. I'm completely blanking on this, but as you turn it all the way to the left, I believe, that's pure compression.
So it's a wet or dry.
Yeah, wet or dry. As you turn it all the way to the right, that's no compression. So if you have a Wampler Ego compressor and you say this thing doesn't do anything, it might be because you've used the blend knob to disable the compressor.
So it's not that it's not compressing. You're just not allowing the compression to go
to be mixed back in.
Right,
yeah,
right.
It's essentially you've got 2 faders on your board. Your guitar comes in. One of those channels is being compressed. The other isn't. And you're adjusting the ratio of those 2 channels together. So that can be super useful because you could squash a signal. Squash means compress a lot, but then only mix in a little bit of it and use mostly dry, uncompressed signal. What that does is it creates essentially a concrete tone foundation underneath whatever you're doing, and you just get massive thickness and a little bit of dynamic control as well, but all of your natural dynamics are still there. You just have this like girthy, thick,
it's
huge
like
thing.
double tracking except exact.
And so if you think about, perfect example, you think about a pop vocal on the radio, an Adele or a Rihanna or a John Mayer.
I prefer not to, but if you know,
yeah, or I mean, you name it. I mean, even freaking like the Beatles, Motown, Led Zeppelin, you name it. There's a pretty good chance that there's some parallel compression on their vocal. And when you think about, oh my gosh, that vocal sounds so girthy. A lot of that, a large ingredient in that for the past, since the 60s, has been parallel compression. It's a standard go-to tool on vocals, drums, bass, guitar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting.
It's fantastic. So, yeah.
I got a couple things.
Go
here.
ahead. I've been talking long enough.
You know, you mentioned the threshold knob on a lot of these, and so we've got I would say, what's the Wampler, like about $150, something like that?
I wanted to say $199.
$199.
Maybe
so
$249.
So your Wampler, let's say it's a $200 pedal. The one that I have right here, because I was hesitant to say, like, I really need this, and I was like, I think I need this, so I wasn't totally committed to dropping a bunch of dough on it. And this one's from Monoprice. I think it works pretty well. I have played around with it. I have toyed around with it.
It probably does. The Dynacomp that it's emulating is a very easy circuit to rip off.
So this one was $36. So I say that for two reasons. One, because like you don't. Is it safe to say that you probably don't have to drop a ton, especially if you.
Well, I'm the wrong guy to ask about that.
Right.
Because I'm a compression snob.
Okay.
Of all the things I'm a snob about, compression's the number one thing. So
Okay.
For me,
you just have access to more ways to control your compression on that.
More ways to control it, and every compressor is going to have a little bit of different
Right, but
tone.
if you're starting out and you're starting to gig and
get
stuff,
a Dynacomp.
right?
Yeah,
You just
get
that's what I'm saying. Like
clone.
a low entry, you're okay with. The other point that I'm bringing up is that this has a single knob that says compression or comp. It also has a volume knob and an EQ knob. We've been talking about threshold as the controller of where you're placing that ceiling on your volume.
Anything louder than this,
Right.
turn it down.
The compression knob on here. So if somebody goes and gets one of these, or another mini pedal, maybe that a single knob or something like that, a main knob, it might say compression on it. That's really the threshold.
Yes, essentially.
Okay.
And
Threshold and compression
It depends.
are
It might be
typically-
a combination of several things. It might be, when you turn it
Threshold
up,
and gain.
it might be threshold gain, and it might even be ratio. It might have a third thing where it's actually increasing the ratio.
All the more reason to play with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I think that the way to think about this is, if your head is spinning and you're thinking, "Boy, this sounds interesting," he said all music in the past 30 years has used compression in some form. I'm trying to build a house without a hammer. Maybe I should get a hammer and start playing around with it. It's an artistic tool like anything else. It's like having a different brush that you can paint with. So the thing to do is to get yourself in a scenario where you can experiment with it in a controlled environment, which I think a looper pedal is the best way to do that.
Yeah.
Loop up some different guitar parts, and then after the looper pedal, take your output of your looper, plug that in the input of your compressor, and start to turn it up.
Yeah, one of the last bands I was in, the rhythm guitar player, he ran sound for some large local acts, and he said, "Dude, you have to get a compressor if I'm gonna be in a band with you. You just have to do it. You have to regulate your volume." And
It's like salt. It's like if a chef said, "Oh, I don't like to use salt," be like, "What the hell are you talking
Exactly.
about?" Yeah, like
And-
it's an essential brush in your arsenal.
he sold me that basic rack mount compressor, and I loved him for it. So yeah, get yourself a compressor if you don't have one.
I think even if you don't have one or aren't quite able to buy one, but you have like GarageBand or something.
Yeah.
I've learned a ton about compression. You doing that on the master track setting, just understanding how these things affect and what it's doing. So if you don't have a looper pedal and you don't
can do it in GarageBand.
you can toy around with it in GarageBand, and you definitely won't hurt
Or
anything.
Mixcraft, if you're a Windows user, it's like $5.
Yeah.
Same thing ish.
So I think maybe one or two more questions. Jeff, do you have?
So since we're talking a little bit more about recording in general, a limiter versus a compressor, are they one and the same, or are they
Essentially, yes. A
little
limiter, in the strictest sense, has an attack of 0, and
Which means it just goes on.
it immediately goes on. Most limiters are a little slower than that, and a ratio of infinity. So as soon as something hits the threshold, for every dB of additional gain past the threshold, no additional volume is added. So your ratio is essentially infinity to 0. So I could add an additional 100 decibels, which would be ridiculous, after the threshold. Anything after that is only going to go up 0. Or in the real world, it'll probably be more like 0.1 or 0.5 or something like that. But there's side effects. As you're going to hear the robot working, turning up and down and not doing it quickly enough or doing it too quickly, or
It's a fat, lazy robot.
it's a fat, lazy robot. Or when they begin to release it, that's the release knob, you might hear it get way louder, which is where the infinite sustain comes in. So I'm going to imitate, I'm going to do kind of the envelope thing again, where I'm going to imitate limiting. So if the threshold is set pretty low,
So you're going to limitate.
I'm going to limitate. So like if the note I'm going to go is just ba, and then I want to limit it, but the threshold is below that, then it might sound like ba. But compression can get weird when it begins to release. So if it's ba, 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 you might end up getting ba, ba, ba. So you have to experiment with that. But I want to encourage everybody, see it as an artistic tool. It's something that you can get different textures with. Get yourself in a scenario, whether that's a loop on GarageBand, where you start with the threshold at 0, which would be as loud as it can possibly go in the digital realm, and then slowly begin to turn it down and just listen, or whether you loop it up and begin to just turn that compressor up and
So
listen
that
to
last thing you just gave an example, is that what they would call pumping?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So bad compression makes the music sound like this.
Right.
And
Which could be a fun effect if you
it
want
can be. And some EDM styles,
Yeah.
that's what they're going for. That's a whole nother story. But yeah.
I think another really good way to illustrate this is that, like, if you're listening to a podcast, hopefully ours, well, I mean, that would be the only way you would hear this. But, you know, you can, sometimes when you hear stuff and you're just like, man, it sounds bad. You may not even be realizing it sounds bad. You just don't like it. But then when you hear something that has like, it's like, oh, they paid attention to getting all the levels right. The levels may not even be right, but it's just not allowing it to be so radically jumping up and down.
And a great example of that would be NPR. NPR's compression is ballin'. As far as, you know, like, and I'm Terry
First
Gross.
and only time that's ever been uttered by a human.
Well, they're just so thick and so wide
Yeah.
and so controlled. And that's their engineer. He's very good.
Yeah. No, I get that. I understand that. I would also say that in a live scenario, you know, a band that maybe doesn't have a ton of experience or doesn't have all the right gear, you listen to them and you're just like, it sounds
All over the place.
messy and a little bit all over the place, and they could be great players. But then you can hear another band, and what's the thing we say? It's like, oh, they sounded tight.
Tight.
Now, there's being in the pocket, working together tight, but there's also what is like the sonic dynamic that's coming at you, and is it chaotic, or is it like this nice wave hitting you?
So it's probably a combination of the sound guy as well as the band playing together and hearing themselves play.
Yeah,
right.
well,
and understand how they sound
Yeah, I'm not
together.
saying that's all because of a compression pedal, but
with drums, it usually is. So a drummer doesn't sound tight without compression. When we think of what good drums sound like, we're thinking of compressed drums.
Right.
All of us are thinking of compressed drums for rock or pop.
So when drums are being mic'd on the board, there's compression
they're
happening.
using compression, and they're using it to control the envelope, a lot of the kick drum, so that instead of bump, 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 it's poof, 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 so that it's punchy.
Right.
So I would say, and I think this is maybe a good spot to transition. Compression is a robot. It is artificially intelligent in that you give it parameters and say, within these parameters, do A, B, C, and D. If this situation happens, then respond in this way.
It's like an automatic thermostat.
It is like a thermostat. That's a perfect illustration. And I think I know a lot of people are hesitant to get into compression and to use compression because it's mysterious, but because it's artificially intelligent, it's an analog device that's artificially intelligent because it makes decisions given the parameters that you give it. There's a great story I read I'm going to go total full nerd on you guys here. So I love, one of my favorite authors is Walter Isaacson. He wrote the Steve Jobs bio, and he wrote a book recently called The Innovators, talking about artificial intelligence and compressors. Stay with me here. And he says, he talked about this chess tournament in 2006 in the end of the book. And he said it was human chess players versus computers versus human computer teams. And, IBM's Watson, we're sitting this is an IBM office-ish, sort of. It's owned by IBM.
I don't know.
Maybe. So
I don't see any logos.
I wasn't supposed to say that. Anyways,
I don't know.
so like IBM's Watson
IBM.
is going to beat Gary Kasparov, or any chess champion. They're going to crush him. And in 2006, that happened. But then an interesting thing happened. The human computer team, so it was like mediocre chess players with laptops, letting the laptops help them crunch numbers and stuff, absolutely demolished even the supercomputers at chess. Because a human's artistic ability combined with the machine's ability to basically, outsource some of your decision making to a machine, that's a really intense combo right there.
Like when Ron Weasley played the chess game of his life.
Right.
And
Or when
beat the board.
when RoboCop goes up against a bad guy, he's a human, but also making decisions. That's not accurate. He's fully computer, isn't he?
No, I don't think so.
Anyways,
He's more human than human.
when you've got like a human that's augmented by a machine's intelligence,
Right.
That's an intense
So a cyborg.
thing. A cyborg. Compressors make you into cyborgs as guitar players.
Oh my.
So, you don't have to think as much. And to your comment, Jeff, it makes it easier to play guitar. You don't have to think about your volume as much if you've told the compressor, this is the right scenario in order to make those decisions. And most compressor pedals make that very easy. It's either too much compression or it's not enough compression on a Dynacomp or a clone.
Is that really going to impact you if you're on a solid state then? Because you're not going to be getting those necessary like swells from loss of headroom like you would on a...
It's going to help.
It's going to help.
It's going to help no matter what.
But it's based on how you set up like the original. There's like on a tube amp you have much more dynamic range when it comes to that. On a solid state, when volume says X, it's X. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, like and that's back into the gain staging topic of if the compressor's helping you, you're playing a rhythm part and the compressor's helping you stay in that sweet spot on the amp. Whether that's helping you distort the amp in a more predictable, more consistent way, or that that's just making you sound tighter as a player, it's going to help.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I'm biased, but I think there are very few scenarios in music where some compression, if it's not compressed at all, is not at least a little bit helpful and allows you to focus on other things like the right note and the time that you play that note. So, yeah, if you can drop out 30% of what you have to do as a musician, and that's really not it, it's probably more like 5 or 10%, it's going to make you play better.
Cool. That's a great way to wrap that up. That was solid. Man, Okay, so that's a lot of stuff to think about. So I encourage all the listeners to listen to that a few times.
So I think we have to decide, is it called compression or not?
The original thing is
Is
like,
compression a good?
is compression a really good?
is it
I would
compression?
love to hear what you guys out there who are listening. Maybe we'll make that a poll. Is compression? I'll throw that out there. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like
It's a shortened name. I think the appropriate and probably original term was dynamic compression.
okay.
So dynamic is in louder notes, quieter notes, compression. And that's really, when you talk about compression, if you call it dynamic
It
compression,
makes more sense to me.
it makes a lot more
All
sense.
right, I'm going to throw one little wrench in here. Then why is it not a normalizer?
That's a conversation for another day, I think.
Okay.
Normalization makes your peak volume consistent from file to file to file. Not really compression, because it doesn't deal with dynamics. It just deals with peak volume.
Okay. All right. So that's a lot for everybody to think about. But bottom line, get yourself a little compressor. Start small. You can get, lots of entry level priced models and then all the crazy ones up to the Keeley and what we saw over.
Yeah, and even if you have a rack mount compressor hanging around, that can be a great thing. Get your looper pedal out, loop a rhythm section or a lead section, and then plug it into a rack mount box, and then plug the output of the rack mount box into an amp or a speaker, and just start goofing around. Start at 0 on the threshold, and then begin to slowly turn it down, or all the way to the left on a guitar pedal, and just experiment. Move slowly and get it. And let me say this one last thing. I think to be able to use an audio tool like compression or EQ or anything well, it comes down to, you take the piece of gear that you have, you put yourself in a scenario that you would use it in, and if I turn this knob to 12 o'clock, in your head, you can anticipate what that will sound like. Once you can do that with a compressor pedal, you will be able to use it in an artistic scenario and as a tool. So
Cool. All right, top 4. Ding, 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 ding. I don't know what that. I just
That's a
did
bell.
that one this time.
That was a bell.
It was like time to fight.
I like that. That's the first thing you thought of, and not dinner. But all right, our top 4 is. Let me see if I can get this right. I got compression in my head. It is our non-traditional guitar body style of choice. All right?
All right.
And Jared's chomping at the bit. Go.
There he
BC rich bitch.
Oh.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I couldn't afford good guitars because I was really young.
That was back then. That was like the top
really
line. Those
kick-ass
were really
guitar
expensive.
right there.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
Which one? Which one? There's so many.
It was black and it had a lightning bolt pattern. This older fella that I would hang out with,
That's
and
wait,
we
which one
played and jammed.
Are you sure it's the bitch and not the Warlock?
You know what? Maybe it's the
The bitch has that huge cutout on the upper shoulder.
maybe it is the Warlock. I'm sorry, it is a Warlock. No, that's not That's not it.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the Warlock. The bitches were really big. I think in the late 70s. That's when they were like ruling the school.
Yes, the Warlock. That's the one.
All right.
A friend of mine loaned me that, and it had the lightning bolt pattern on it, and it was. I thought it was really cool because it was, heavy
A lot of
metal-ish,
angles.
and it was really
A
different.
lot of points. Pointies.
And I barely had any guitar effects though, so it didn't really sound, just sounded clean most of the time. I mean, my dad had this old JVC tape deck that I would plug it in and turn the input volume all the way up. I used it as a gain.
Yeah.
Probably sounded
I think
kinda
Mick
cool.
Mars was using one of those early on, as I recall.
So that's my choice, man, just because of sentimental reasons.
Okay. Chris.
I for a long time had a K Starburst, and it was essentially
How do you spell
K-A-Y.
K-A-Y.
It was essentially an Explorer combined with a Flying V.
Yeah.
And,
really goofy.
I don't even know if you'll
Very
be able to
extreme.
find it. Very.
No, they come up on Craigslist often, believe it or not. I've seen quite a few.
I sold mine on Craigslist a few years ago to Josh of Tiger Tree, a delightful individual with a wonderful store.
Okay.
Okay.
I think it's just called the Star.
Is it the Star?
I think it's just called Star.
I'll know it if I see it. I don't see it.
There it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
This guy?
Oh man. That
Yeah,
thing
it's
was
like
so
it's
weird.
literally like a Z.
And it had a huge. Mine had a really like vintage 70s Fender style headstock. So just that huge circle at the tip of the headstock.
Yeah.
And it added like all this extra weight to it. It was single humbucker, never meant to be played clean.
let me ask you something. Did K?
That was the fastest.
Let me ask you something.
Did K copy off of Dean, or did Dean copy off of K?
I would say probably Dean off of K, because Dean's a lot newer. K has been around
Right.
for
millions of years.
Dean's been doing it since the 70s.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please, somebody answer that and put it in the comments.
There's we're gonna have to find that out.
It probably was
great,
K. K copied for a living. That's what they did.
K, I believe.
That was not okay.
Oh man. Okay.
You just accidentally did it
Just
again.
lost another pepperoni.
I thought that was going to
Okay,
cost me a piece.
Anyways, yeah, we'll have to dig into that. Which came first?
The Dean or the K?
Yeah. But I mean, everybody was copying. There was a time. I mean, you're bringing the Tysko and all that stuff is like copy city, right?
Yep. I think K was the. Am I wrong about that? I think
K and Harmony kind of.
they bought the Kalamazoo
like they were on
factory
it,
when
yeah.
Gibson got rid of it. Yeah.
Hefe, what do you got?
Mine's not as extreme as these guys, but I really like the Wolfgang style guitar.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, boring.
What? I mean, I guess that's
Like I said, it's not extreme.
Yeah.
But as far as like
that isn't
like introducing a new
very
guitar
extreme.
style
Yeah.
to the world,
Okay, I gotcha.
I thought it was a nice minimalist, unique looking guitar.
Okay.
Is that what Brian May uses?
PV, right? Yeah, PV made those.
PV made them for a while.
Yeah. No, Brian May doesn't. No, Brian May he uses his red special. That's
He made
the-
with his
Ernie
dad.
Ball?
That's it. Yeah.
Ernie Ball.
He actually
is
handmade
the-
that with his dad. The first one.
Yeah.
Kind of
So
amazing.
was it Ernie
Yeah.
Ball that made him first, or was it PV that made him first?
I think it was Ernie Ball.
I can't remember. I have to look.
Yeah.
The Wolfgang?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't remember.
Yeah. I mean, there was a switch right in the middle.
Yeah.
Anyways, we were running along, so I got to wrap this up. So mine's definitely. I was going to say Flying V because I think Flying Vs are pretty rad, but if I had a choice of a Flying V or an Explorer, I'm going to take the Explorer. I loved it. It's just so freaking cool. And
James Hetfield kind of ruined.
no, that's so it's kind of interesting because obviously, I mean, the Explorer had been around since the late
50s, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough,
The Corona
there's
ones,
the
too.
war of like who exactly did come up with that, and the fellow that actually created the humbucker. Anybody?
Seth Lever.
Anyone? Seth Lever. Credits himself with coming up. He said that he told the name is escaping me. The other fella, I want to say it's Montgomery. It's not Montgomery. I can't remember his name. But the head of design, the actual head of design. Seth Lever wasn't a head of design, but the actual head of design at Gibson at the time. In an interview, Seth Lever was saying how he said we should do one that kind of looks like a half crushed beer can. And he's also semi-credited for coming up with the Flying V because he said, we should make a guitar that when you lean it against something, it won't fall over. That's like
Nice.
actually what he said. And then they
Nice.
came up with the flying V. Anyways, that's
can't hold.
that's all debatable in history now, but
It does look really 50s-y if you kind of
it
reorient
can.
yourself. It's got
It
like
can look
atomic
50s.
Well, yeah, look
thing
at
going on.
the long points, like the fishtail.
Yeah.
fishtail.
On
That
automobiles.
car,
That's what I
stuff
like
that.
about that is that you can either retro them to original, or I grew up when the only person playing an Explorer was James Hetfield.
Yeah.
At least in my world. And when he's knees back, or knees forward, back, leaning back on that thing, just powering away, is like, there's nothing more badass than that, right?
Back then at the time.
There was a Leonard
in the day.
Skinner
In the
guitar
day.
player,
Yeah.
actually. Leonard Skinner had actually used an Explorer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of those.
I bought one.
What's his name?
I
Sorry, I
like
can't
it.
remember.
Anyway,
his
so
name.
there it is. Oh man, so much stuff. We could just keep going on and on and on. But that's why we have more episodes. So with that, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you, Chris, for hooking this up. Well, yeah, but then he went to ESP, and yeah, I guess he was always with ESP, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, see, man, I was just
Sidetracked.
about to do that, and then I
Sidetracked.
saw the picture of him with his ESP up there. All right, thank you, Chris, for dumping all that compression on us
My pleasure.
and squishing our brains and our listeners' brains. And thank you everyone for listening and sticking with us. This is a little bit long, but we appreciate it and hope you like it. Hope you dig it. And I'm going to use a compressor for this. Subscribe.
Well, that's it for these knobs. Please join us on Facebook.com/groups/guitar knobs and tell us what you think and share your stories and guitar stuff along with ours. You can also find us at twitter.com/guitar_knobs and also at our website at guitarknobs.podbean.com.